I'm not the werewolf. I did not get a call.
Acting.
Look, I was skeptical, but now forget about it. I want Nick Cage's Ghost Rider and Eric Bana's Hulk just crashing through every multiverse portal. Send them all in.
Don't cast that spell. I won't.
With Spider-Man No Way Home instantly jumping into any sane person's top 10 MCU films, to say it didn't leave some questions would be a gross lie. I have literally all the questions. However, today let's start with what has been happening in Tobey and Andrew's separate universes since we last saw them, and what is going to happen now that they've been through what I would assume would be a life-changing experience. Let's take a look right now. I'm just going to call them by their actual names, because let's be real, if I call them all Peter Parker, we're going to be more confused than Ned.
Oh, you're using their made-up names.
That being said, I could watch these three Spider-Men just have a conversation for 2.5 hours. During their conversation atop the newly redesigned Statue of Liberty, Tom Holland asks one of the millions of questions we were all thinking. He wanted to know some of the coolest villains they have all fought, and their answers were no surprise to us, as they were all references to past Spider-Man films. However, I believe there is enough information in the film to piece together where their journeys with their villains went from where we last left off, as well as speculate about some other possible villains they may have faced. Let's start with our guy Andrew, Peter 3, the amazing one, if you will. Last we left Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker, he had just lost Gwen. His best friend Harry had become the next Goblin, and he was gearing up to form one of comics' most famous villainous teams, the Sinister Six. That plan even got put into motion as we saw Andrew taking on Paul Giamatti's Oscar-worthy performance as the Rhino, better known as the Russian guy in a rhinoceros machine. In the basement of Oscorp, we saw mechanized suits for other famous Spider-Man villains that included the Vulture and Doc Ock as well. I think it's safe to say that Andrew never came across the famous scientist Otto Octavius before, as it's likely he would have mentioned some connection upon seeing the version from Tobey's universe. However, Tom and Andrew never got to compare notes about their bird-related Michael Keaton-looking villains, so it's certainly possible that Andrew has faced his universe's version of the Vulture. However, even with that speculation, the cancelled Amazing Spider-Man 3 film was rumored to feature Christoph Waltz as Otto Octavius and Matthew McConaughey as Adrian Toomes. They would have rounded out the Sinister Six alongside the aforementioned Rhino, Felicity Jones returning to become the Black Cat, Dahan returning as the Green Goblin with his father Norman Osborn revealing himself to be alive and taking over the moniker of the King Goblin. The sequel was even rumored to reintroduce Eddie Brock, hinting at a possible return of Venom in the Amazing Spider-Man universe. Now, none of this officially happened, but theoretically, Andrew Garfield could have faced the most Rogues Gallery villains in his universe out of any of the Spider-Men. That being said, while we are all unsure who he faced, how he faced them was definitely hinted at. Andrew's Spider-Man clearly became a much darker version of the character, developing his more goofy side likely as a coping mechanism to offset the rage he felt inside. Unable to overcome Gwen's passing, Andrew's Peter had a few choice phrases to describe the future we never got to see. He mentions that he became full of rage, one day stopped pulling his punches, and does not want Tom Holland to turn out like him. I think Andrew took a dark turn, and may have even gotten into a Punisher-like mood, where he decided his villains were better if they never got up again. He may have even ended Harry's life as revenge for the loss of his true love. Another hint we get is when Dr. Connors asks Electro if anyone knows about his fate, and there is oddly no answer. The last we saw the Lizard, he was locked away in Ravencroft, recovering from his condition. However, what if he eventually broke out again, and Andrew decided to stop pulling his punches, and is responsible for his end as well? All I'm saying is I don't think a season-changing montage in front of Gwen's grave could have cured Peter fully of the darkness within, making me think he at least had a period where he made some decisions he would come to regret. Now, of course, we have to get to Tobey, who is introduced as the much older and wiser Spider-Man, meaning that a much longer period of time has passed since we last saw him. He mentions his fights with Venom, and obviously the likes of Sandman, Doc Ock, Norman, and Harry Osborn, as well as his chase with Dennis Carradine, the man believed to be responsible for Uncle Ben's fate. However, a lot of time passed, making the possibility that he faced some others very high. He also seems to not have lost a step in terms of fighting capability. Sure, he has some slight residual back issues, but all of us aging crime-fighting vigilantes do. I think Tobey could have faced a more mature villain, whose story impacts him greatly, much like that of Kraven the Hunter. I think that storyline adapted to an older Tobey Spider-Man would make a lot of sense, as it's the kind of story that really forces Spider-Man to look inward and become his full potential as he is hunted by the world's greatest hunter. As far as the other villains go, this version of Spider-Man played by Tobey in No Way Home witnessed the passing of Venom, Green Goblin, Doc Ock, and New Goblin, meaning he never saw them again. Sandman too hinted that he had gone a long time since he floated away in the wind without seeing Peter, based on how he greets Tom during his introduction in No Way Home. The two left on good terms, and he had no reason to cross paths or fight again. There also may be some hints in what we know about Sam Raimi's cancelled Spider-Man 4. For starters, the Vulture was yet again supposed to appear. I'm starting to see why Homecoming went with Vulture as the villain right away, considering every other Spider-Man franchise ended when they even considered having Vulture in the next film. Anne Hathaway was also rumored to appear as Felicia Hardy, aka the Black Cat, until she traded for a different cat-themed comic book character. And Dylan Baker, who played Kurt Connors in other Raimi trilogy installments, was rumored to make his reptilian transformation here as well. Lastly, Quentin Beck's Mysterio was confirmed to be making an appearance, though the Vulture would have been the main villain. Regardless of who he did or did not end up facing, Tobey has grown into the wise hero we all knew he could be. If there is one other huge aspect of Spider-Man's life besides his enemies, it is those he holds dearest. We just saw Tom let go of not only his beloved Aunt May, but his best friend and true love, Ned and MJ. Andrew and Tobey's journey really was focused around their relationships with Mary Jane and Gwen. It drove a lot of their character. So what other meaningful connections could they have made or mended during the time since we last saw them? Starting with Tobey this time, he seems to have had a very similar path to Peter B. Parker from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. We saw the rocky relationship he shared with Mary Jane for 3 films, and when we last left them, they really weren't together, nor were they apart. Let's just say if Facebook relationship statuses were a thing then, it would be pretty permanently set to "it's complicated." There was the whole date with Gwen, plus you'd have to really love someone to overlook them dancing in the street like that. However, Tobey revealed to us that after all these years they have been able to make it work out. I doubt we saw the last of their relationship troubles, especially if Anne Hathaway did show up as Black Cat, historically an adversary and love interest to Peter Parker. However, Tobey seems happy and hopefully him and MJ have set up a life together. Andrew is a much more sad story. With the loss of Gwen, he revealed that he really was never able to find someone else. I'm sure there were attempts, like his universe's Black Cat or even the version of Mary Jane from his universe, rumored to be played by Shailene Woodley in the cancelled 3rd installment. However, the bond that was set up between him and Gwen was just too strong for him to easily move past, and the trauma he faced from losing her seemed to make him really emotionally unavailable. This aspect of the Peter we are used to, being absent, only gives more credence to the theory that this Peter was a much angrier, violent version. However, now that he has had the moment of saving a different Peter's true love, it's almost as if you could see a glimmer of hope in those eyes. Now, we have guessed what we may have missed since we last saw them, but what are we missing going forward, now that all the Spider-Men and villains have been sent back? First, it's important to note that not every character, even ones from the same universes, are being sent back to the exact same place. Each returning character will be causing a branched timeline within their own universe. For example, though Norman will be going back to where he is alive, Sandman is returning to reality where both the Green Goblin and Doc Ock are long gone. Therefore, each individual character has a unique timeline they are returning to. Starting with the Lizard, he was likely pulled out of his rampage during the first Amazing Spider-Man. That rampage ended with him being cured and imprisoned in Ravencroft for his crimes. Therefore, while Tom Holland believed he was helping all of them, the truth is that the Lizard will likely be going back to a similar fate as the last time we saw him, essentially cured of his reptile infection and awaiting to face justice for his crimes. The next character whose timeline is unlikely to change all that much is actually Doc Ock. Though he was the first one cured when Peter replaced his fried inhibitor chip, it is important to think of the moment he is returning to. This was the final fight in Spider-Man 2 where Doc Ock regained control of his arms if only for a brief moment, but long enough to drown his machine in the river. Therefore, the Otto Octavius returning to his fusion experiment may be of the same state of mind as the one who willingly sacrificed himself, suggesting he may do that again. Sandman and Electro are returning to moments that will change their futures going forward. Electro's life was saved thanks to his powers being gone, and Sandman's life has definitely at the very least become less complicated. Both, however, are likely to face prison time for their crimes, but their lives may have truly been saved by the Spider People's efforts. The definitive character whose life will be extremely different now is Norman Osborn. With the Goblin out of his head and him returning to some point of the 2002 Spider-Man film, he likely will not reach the point that caused his demise. This will change that entire timeline. Peter may still face villains like Doc Ock and Sandman, but his life will truly be changed. Norman may have reconnected with his son Harry, who now will never become the new Goblin or develop a hatred for Spider-Man for the death of his father. Overall, Norman has a real shot to live a happy life now. Tobey will be returning to MJ, granted with a fresh stab wound, but hopefully to continue his happy life. His journey will have had the least effect considering he seems to come from the furthest future of any other character. Andrew now may be returning to his timeline with a new outlook on life. That look on his face when he saved MJ showed a possible moment of closure for what happened to Gwen. He connected with his fellow Spider-Men and is possibly ready to become the hero he was meant to be. We certainly missed out on a lot, but just seeing Tobey and Andrew suit up again was something special. What else do you think happened in their timeline since the last time we saw them? Maybe Tobey became a part-time jazz singer.